Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and demystify exactly why you're avoiding your academic assignments today. I mean, if you're a college student with exams fast approaching, you've probably promised yourself you'd do your absolute best to prepare and top the class. But instead, well, you're here. Now don't worry, today we aren't going to give you some short-lived rah-rah motivational lecture. Instead, we're going to look at the exact science. We're drawing on over 10 years of research by experts like Dr. Pierce Steele to go straight to the root cause of your procrastination.
We've put together a really structured roadmap to get you out of this slump. We're going to cover 1, the student's dilemma, 2, the psychology of delay, 3, the motivation equation, 4, the fear of failure, 5, your academic action plan, and 6, the actual cost of inaction. Let's get into it.
First up, Section 1, the student's dilemma.
Seriously, think about it. You have a paper due tomorrow, or maybe a massive exam approaching. So why exactly are you watching this explainer instead of doing your work? Why is it that when a task requires real, physical, mental, or emotional effort, we just instinctively replace it with something easier? Like endless scrolling on social media or binge-watching comedy videos. Now, you've probably felt the deep sense of guilt about this, right? Kind of assuming it's some modern failure on your part. But guess what? You are definitely not alone.
Get this. A University of Toronto Egyptologist actually translated an ancient Egyptian hieroglyph from 1400 BC that basically says, "Friend, stop putting off work and allow us to go home in good time." It's incredible. This proves you shouldn't feel uniquely guilty. This is an ancient human flaw dating back over 3,000 years. This exact same frustration echoes all through history, from ancient Greek poets in 800 BC all the way to the Indian poet Sant Kabir, who famously warned people to work today instead of putting it off for tomorrow. It's a deeply, deeply ingrained human struggle.
In fact, according to studies by researchers by Ellis and Canois back in 1977, and then followed up in 2002, a massive 80 to 90% of college students procrastinate just like you do. However, and this is wild, Dr. Pierce Steele notes that chronic procrastination has grown by 300 to 400% in just the last 40 years. Half the world's population now procrastinates frequently. Now in college, you at least have deadlines that force you to eventually do the work at the absolute last minute. But honestly, relying on that sheer panic, it's a terrible long-term strategy for your well-being.
Which brings us to Section 2, the psychology of delay. We need to talk about cognitive dissonance. This mental conflict is the exact scientific reason you feel so stressed, depressed, and guilty while you're sitting there watching a comedy video instead of writing your essay. A study conducted at a German university on over 1,000 people actually found that this massive gap between what your goals are and what your current actions are leads directly to high levels of stress, anxiety, and fatigue. Your brain knows you should be studying, but your body is resting, and it creates this incredibly toxic internal tug of war.
So, how do we fix it? That's Section 3, the motivation equation.
First up in our equation is the expectancy theory, introduced by Victor Harold Vroom back in 1964. Here's the deal. If you believe you have a super low chance of getting a top rank, your brain automatically kills your motivation to study for it. Seriously, if you know you usually lag behind in class and the reward is only for the #1 student, your brain basically calculates that the expectancy of winning is way too low. The result? Your drive to work just completely vanishes.
Next, we have David McClelland's need theory from the 1960s. We all have psychological needs, right? For some people, it's affiliation and social connection. For politicians, maybe it's power. Well, if an assignment doesn't naturally appeal to your specific psychological needs, you will instinctively push it away. For instance, if your dominant need is building connections, you're probably going to procrastinate big time on a solo, isolated research paper. But you might be highly motivated for a collaborative group project.
Then we have the cumulative prospect theory, coined in 1992 by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. This introduces a really powerful concept, loss aversion. What this means is that studying just to get a good grade won't motivate you nearly as much as studying to avoid the catastrophic loss of failing a class. Humans will work significantly harder to avoid losing what they already have or to avoid a disaster, like a doctor telling you you'll have a heart attack if you don't exercise, than they will for just a generic positive gain.
Finally, we have the hyperbolic discounting theory. Look, we are biologically wired to crave instant gratification over an academic degree that literally takes years to earn. It's kind of like that old proverb, we'd much rather have $9 in cash right now than the promise of $13 later. Thinking about the long-term future is great and all, but our human biology strongly prefers a reward it can experience this very second.
And this biological wiring perfectly explains why that promised 5-minute social media break just effortlessly defeats your long-term academic goals, usually turning into an hour of completely wasted time. You tell yourself, hey, it'll just be 5 minutes, but these apps are literally designed to suck you in. An hour passes. Then you decide you need a snack to get energy to study, so you raid the fridge. Then you need to set the mood, so you watch a YouTube video. Suddenly you feel tired, so you take a shower to freshen up. Before you know it, day turns into night. The panic alarm in your mind finally goes off, and boom, you're pulling an all-nighter, fueled entirely by the sheer dread of a looming deadline.
Let's move on to Section 4, the fear of failure. The reality is, sometimes you aren't unmotivated at all. You are simply terrified of trying your absolute best and still failing. So your ego steps in and protects you by making you procrastinate. We're so scared of what others will say. Think about it. If you actually try your hardest on that essay and still get a bad grade, your ego is totally crushed. But if you procrastinate and just slap it together at the last minute, you have a built-in excuse, right? You can say, well, I didn't really try, I only did it the night before. Let's be real. Your ego is the most useless thing in your life, but it is a massive, massive driver of academic procrastination.
Okay, so what do we do about all this? Section 5, your academic action plan.
By diagnosing your exact mental block on paper and applying these scientific workarounds, you can actually bypass your brain's natural resistance to hard work. Step 1. Take a pen and empty your thoughts. Write down exactly why you are delaying. Simply identifying the problem is half the solution. Step 2. If you lack motivation, trigger your loss aversion. Don't just think about getting a good grade. Think about the very real, disastrous consequences of failing the class or losing your scholarship. Then, steps 3 and 4 combat that hyperbolic discounting we talked about. If your exam is months away, divide your studying up into tiny micro steps and attach an immediate, instant reward to completing each and every tiny section. Which brings us to our final point. Section 6, the cost of inaction.
Back in 1995, Gilovich and Medvek's temporal theory of regret proved something really profound. They showed that the pain of writing that essay right now is absolutely nothing compared to the permanent regret of throwing your potential away. Sure, taking action might produce a little bit of regret or stress in the short term, like the annoyance of having to read a textbook tonight instead of partying with friends. But inaction generates a massive, lifelong regret. Procrastinating when there are no strict deadlines, like chasing your dream career or taking care of your health, that leaves you with a permanent what-if that will literally haunt you for decades.
So, you now understand the actual science behind your delay. You know all about cognitive dissonance, loss aversion, and how the fear of failure is secretly protecting your fragile ego. With all this science laid out in front of you and your academic action plan ready to go, what is your very next move going to be? Are you going to let a 5-minute break steal your entire future? Or are you going to close this explainer, grab a pen, write down your micro steps, and finally start? The choice is entirely yours.